Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Pursuit Podcast. I'm your host, Grayson Garvin. Today's episode is my interview with Jason Weiss, a friend in Nashville who is a former attorney turned founder of Symphony Advice, a business consulting firm offering business owners and C-level executives choreographed strategy and advice on an ongoing basis. I hope you will catch Jason's thoughtfulness and the way he emphasizes his points through story and personal experience. So without further ado, let's get to it. Jason, welcome to the Pursuit Podcast this afternoon. We're so excited to have you.
No, thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, well, again, thinking about, getting prepared for this interview today, I was really excited because in some ways we haven't known each other that long, but in some ways I really look up to what you have built really in life, but especially in your short time here in Nashville. We both have somewhat similar backgrounds. We're both former athletes. Again, you've done a really unbelievable job in developing deep relationships with people, both personally and professionally. And, it's something that I really look up to. So what I'm really excited for today is for folks to hear your story and, kind of what drives you and what sets you apart and what your purpose is. So really thank you for giving all of your time to hang out with us this afternoon.
No, of course, Grayson. Well, I appreciate calling us both athletes. I always say me and Tom Brady also have 6 Super Bowl rings together. So I appreciate that.
That's right. Same here. I think 6 Super Bowl rings between all three of us. So
Yep, that's great. Wonderful.
Well, to start us off, I really want to, give folks a little bit better idea of who you are and where you come from. So if you don't mind giving us a 30,000 foot view of kind of your story and maybe a couple of stops along the way to get us to where you are right now in December of 2023.
Yeah, no, that's great. So I always believe everything's an indication of everything else. So kind of where I'm at today is a direct byproduct of kind of how I was raised and where I was raised, quite honestly. I was born in Oakland, California in the early 70s, and kind of my parents were met in San Francisco State in the late 60s. So by nature, I was forced to be this child of a hippie parents. So I was forced to be anti-establishment, anti-government before it was ever cool to be any of those things. I'm part of the OGs in that context. So I was brought up my dad was Jewish and my mom was Catholic. So everything around our household was no religion, no politics, and Birkenstocks pretty much. That was my upbringing. Kind of have thoughtful conversations, but really be kind of Socratic and contrarian in the way kind of I viewed everything. So that was kind of my upbringing. And as Grayson mentioned, I played a lot of sports, had a great career in that sense. But I ultimately went to law school. In law school, kind of is the pivoting point where took my contrarian upbringing with kind of a rudimentary fundamental education, and then those two married. And that's kind of today I'm able to kind of really get to the heart of people because I don't carry any titles or allegiances or anything to that front. I just try to get to the heart of the person.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. So walk us through a little bit more. So what do you do now for work in Nashville? I know it's not just in that Nashville, but walk us through on a day-to-day basis. And I know you have your hands in a lot of different things, but what do you do on a day-to-day basis in serving clients and try to help them move the needle forward?
No, great. So I've been an attorney now attorney by trade now 24, 25 years. And being an attorney taught me was to ask really good questions, and not just a question about what you're doing today, but what you did previously that better prepared me for how I could handle my clients in the moment. I have this saying where a lot of times your actions are so loud, I can't hear what you're saying today. Again, your actions are so loud, I can't hear what you're saying, which made me a great attorney because I could see what somebody was saying, but their actions said something totally differently. So I could create this plan for them, legally speaking, that was indicative of their actions. And invariably, they'd love this plan and they'd say, "It's like you read my mind, Jason." And I just said, "No, I just didn't listen to you. I watched your actions." So I was able to really kind of do predictive analysis a lot. And as I kind of grew in that space, I did less and less legal work and more consulting with clients. Kind of what are all the issues you're dealing? What are all the variables and kind of what you're looking at today? Instead of just help you with the 3 legal problems, I can help you with the totality of your problems. And because I was able to ask quick questions, find out your background, find out what some of the issues you've dealt with in the past, some of the things you were drawn to, I was really able to give really good advice on a totality of things. So as kind of my careers progressed, it's been less about legal work and more about the totality of other issues that my clients are facing. Everything from expansion to funding to employees to all those sort of different things. Now, in that process of just meeting people and talking to people, I've always tried to be highly intentional about everything I've done. So I would hear something and it wouldn't just go in one ear, out the other. It would be really, what does that person mean? How can I solve that problem? And generally speaking, a lot of problem solving is marrying one person with somebody else. I may not be able to solve your problem, but if I could find somebody that does, I can better serve my clients. So a lot of what I've done is helping my clients as a consultant, and I've grown into this, I'll call it a networking for lack of a better word, but this group of people that is helping each other on a macro level.
Yeah. I love that. And, again, it's about people helping people. And two, being a part of that group. One of the things that strikes me is that that is really the intention of each individual. It's not necessarily just, hey, what can Grayson get from Jason? But it's more so, what can Grayson do to help Jason and help everybody else around Jason or the people that Jason knows. And ultimately, what happens, the positive byproduct of that is that you have a whole bunch of people helping each other, and then good things happen to the people that originally sought out to help. And it's just kind of, it's great all around.
No, no, 1,000%. It's about treating others. And I guess there's a funny story that I remember. This is, gosh, this was a farmer in town. And this farmer in town would always get a loaf of bread, and they'd get this loaf of bread. Well, this farmer was somewhat unscrupulous and one time took this baker to court and said, "This is not a full pound of loaf of bread." And said, and they tested, and sure enough, it wasn't a full pound of a loaf of bread. And they said, "How did you find that out?" He said, "Well, I took the loaf of bread, and I would give this person a pound of butter. And I found out my pound of butter was more than the loaf of bread." Meaning, my point is it was a great way to understand how treating others equally and fairly is such a byproduct of everything that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And I haven't read it yet, but again, you passed off a really good book to me, a week and a half or two ago, the Go Giver. And that, I think, really speaks to a lot of your mindset in the way that you're trying to interact with others, is really trying to help them and move the needle forward for them and put yourself on the same side of the table as them, which, again, is good for everybody.
So the thesis was many years ago, what if I could get really sharp people around each other? What if I could get really sharp people that sharpened each other? And then what I did is, on top of that, what if I could do this? What if I could get sharp people to sharpen each other, but give everybody the book, The Go Giver? And if those of you out there have not heard of the book, it's written by a guy named Bob Berg, and it's called The Go Giver. And if you haven't read it, I encourage you to read it. It's only you'd read it in a couple hours. But the book is, as the title says, giving to somebody without an expectation in return. So I just said, hey, listen, what if we got really sharp people together and they helped each other without expecting anything in return? And we try to stay true to that and try to push that narrative of like helping each other. And it's interesting. And Grace, I know I've kind of used this analogy when we first met, which is, if you go to lunch with somebody and you go to lunch and you buy lunch and I buy you lunch. And then a month later, we go to lunch, same place, and we order the same thing, and the bill comes. The other person might say, Jason, you bought lunch the first time. Let me buy you lunch. It's this law of reciprocity. So I always kind of say is if you want to be connected to somebody or be intentional about that, intentionally help those people out. You're not going to do it with the expectation of anything in return, but people's human nature is to pay people back, to do things, to push it forward, and those kind of things. So we've created an ecosystem of really sharp people that are intentionally helping other people out.
I love that. I love that. It's very, how would I say it? It's kind of the industrious way of doing things, right? It's like, again, you're playing the relational long game, but at the end of the day, it's absolutely the way that things should be done by far more people. It feels very easy in nature, but in execution, it's not, because a lot of people don't have the concept of delayed gratification at the front of their minds.
Grayson, you alluded to before we came on air that I'm not on a lot of social media. Um, and I guess I'd say this. My analogy is this. I remember I was working with some people, this is many years ago, and they were deaf. And but the person was telling me when somebody loses a sense, the other senses get heightened. They get heightened just because they've lost a sense. So I tell people, not that there's a badge of honor me not being on social media or anything like that, but what it's heightened is my intentionality about conversations with people in front of me, because that's the only mechanism I have to connect. I don't have LinkedIn. I don't have Facebook. I don't have Instagram. I don't have any of those things, which heightens my desire and my need to connect with people individually in person. So again, for somebody that has none of those social media platforms, be able to stay connected individually is so critically important for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love that. So it's very clear that you take a level of intentionality with your business, with your personal life, with your interactions with everybody else. But this is a podcast specifically describing and discussing success and purpose, but then also the journey behind what's required to attain success and purpose. And the fun thing about success and purpose is those mean different things to different people. So for you sitting here today, how do you define success for yourself in your business life and in your personal life?
I live by this. I've got a lot going on. I have a couple different companies, three kids, a family. And people ask me, how do you do it all? And I kind of say is this way, is I remember years ago, about 8 years ago, I lived right near where my office was. And, my wife would come over to the office sometime, bring the kids, and I'd see the kids and they'd play around. And then I'd go home early and I'd go home and I'd kind of finish on my phone, a couple work emails. And it dawned on me one day, and I said, "Oh, this is odd. When I'm at work, I get distracted sometimes, not bad, but I get distracted. They come in. And then when at home, I'm distracted on my phone. This is ridiculous. Why don't I become 100% present 100% of the time? Again, 100% present 100% of the time. And success to me is being in that moment all the time. I mean, there's different successes. The success around with my kids is different than the success I have in business. That's a different success I have with my wife and various things. And I don't measure in those contexts of like, what is this measure with my kids? My measure is, am I present in that moment? And am I giving them 100%? The byproduct and the conclusion is going to be whatever it is. But the only thing I can control is my activity, my involvement, my intentionality.
I love it. I love it. So with us all being human, right? It's like we're never on our P's and Q's at all times. And I think, again, hearing other people that would say something similar, a lot of people have a process by which that they, or, again, a level of intentionality or a routine in which they have in their lives to prepare themselves for work. And so they, okay, I had to do A, B, and C before I get to the office when I know I'm, locked in. Same thing for personal life, family, spouse, all of that. So what is your routine, or what process do you go through to ensure that as often as humanly possible, you are as present as humanly possible in the interactions that you have?
No, 1,000% crazy, because guess what? We all are human. And then do I find moments where I've done check my phone or do this? Absolutely. And I guess there is a component of grace to yourself where you may have fallen short, but also a level of self realization that, hey, listen, I need to be doing whatever it's doing in the moment. And I guess I'd say this for those of you that are entrepreneurs or business owners or things like that. One of the best things I did is I gave my assistant my calendar. And a lot of us, for those of you out there, have an assistant that has the calendar, and I get that. But I gave her one more responsibility, which was this: I'm not checking a time. I'm never checking time like my phone or my watch, or I'm never checking a time. You are responsible for pulling me in a meeting and out of meeting. What that did is it got me super intentional to listen to that person. I wasn't thinking when the meeting's over, because I had no idea when the meeting's over. As you know, Grace, you've been in my office enough. 5 minutes before my meeting should over, she walks in, she says, listen, meeting's over in 5 minutes. But when you've got that, you've eliminated every chance of saying, when's this meeting over? When do I need? You're just there in the moment. Give yourself enough remove enough of those contributing factors which distract you from being intentional in the moment.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. You've also alluded to in our time together, you have you're quite physically fit, which I know you would probably not say that, but I will. You're quite physically fit. And I know that, again, running is also a part of your morning routine to where you spend time thinking. It's like that's a piece that, needs to be there to help you be what you would feel prepared for the day to be intentional and in the moment.
Yeah. No, Grace, we all know waking up first thing in the morning, not checking our phone, being in our thoughts, meditation, prayer, whatever that we know that's the right way to wake up. Just how many of us do that? I would say is this, we got first of the years right around the corner. And I would kind of say this. So as far as my routine, I wake up at the same time. I run for 75 minutes at a day. I don't check my phone. I keep this moment for me for 75 minutes. Now, again, yes, many of you may think that's crazy for running for 75 minutes in the morning, but whatever it is, start your day the best way possible to get you prepared for that day. I would say is eliminate all the things that could distract you. Eliminate again, anything that could distract you. Get yourself ready. No different than the right foundation for a house. Get yourself ready. And then what that'll do is that'll be the advocate to keep you on schedule, to keep you focused throughout the day. Starting your day in the right way is so critical.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I think it's so important, and I think I think about it for my little kids. It's like kids do so well in a routine because they know what to expect. It's like we're just big kids. Actually, like at the end of the day, it's like we're the same way. It's like our bodies, our minds, everything about us does better when we're able to, in some way, shape, or form, anticipate what's coming next. It's like, okay, I need to get up and run for 75 minutes because that's what I do every day. And then if you don't, it feels almost out of sorts. And what that does is that's the precursor of setting everything up subsequently for the way it should be.
Absolutely. Starting your day right. For me, that's a critical step. But yes, um, physically fit comes from that. But I'll tell you, today, Grayson, 49 years old with a bad Achilles tendon. I don't know how physically fit I am right now today. So there you go.
Mm. I love it. I love it. So, again, you've had a lot of success both personally and professionally by a variety of different metrics. Um, But you looking here today, or you sitting here today, you said at 49 with a bad Achilles. Um, what do you wish that 22-year-old Jason knew coming out of school that would have saved you a lot of headache and heartache that you do know now?
Listen, I'll share my favorite story. And this is one of my favorite stories of all time. And this is about two little boys, two 8-year-old little boys, identical little boys, two 8-year-old identical little boys. And one was always happy and one was always sad. These are two identical boys. One was happy, one was always sad. The dad was like, same household, identical twins. Like, why is one happy? One is always sad. I'm going to take these boys to the doctor to kind of find out what's going on. Why is one happy? One always sad. So the doctor said, I've got a test for this. We're going to take the little boy that's always sad and put him in a room filled with games, toys, and candy, and let him just be in there for a whole hour. Okay. And then we're going to take the little boy that's always happy and put him in a room filled with just horse manure. And we're going to wait 1 hour. The little boy in the horse manure, the little boy there. So they waited an hour. They came back to the rooms and they first went into the little boy that's always sad. And they opened the door and they saw the little boy just sitting there. They said, little boy, why didn't you play with the games? And he said, I just couldn't figure them out. So why didn't you play with the toys? Well, I might break them. Why didn't you eat the candy? Why, I might get a stomach ache. They're like, well, that is really sad. They closed the door and they went down the hall to the little boy that's always happy. They opened the door and immediately when they walked in, there was manure everywhere on the ceiling, on the windows, the walls, the door. It was everywhere. And he was throwing it everywhere. They said, little boy, what are you doing? And he said, with all this manure, there has to be a pony somewhere. And I love that story because listen, if I know, yeah, on the outside, Grayson, yeah, you look, I've got some successes. I've a great family, great business, that kind of thing. But there's a lot of manure in between. There's a whole lot of manure. And what I try to remind myself is in every piece of manure, there's got to be a pony somewhere. Sometimes it's super difficult to find. I'm not lying to y'all. Listen, I've had moments where there may have been a pony. I just kind of kept saying it. But for those of you, my 22-year-old self is listen, there's gonna be a whole lot of manure in your career, a whole lot. If you could always try to find that pony, you'll be in a better off position than anybody else.
Yeah, I love that because it is what it's about, right? We talk about it in some previous episodes. Success again, whatever I'm saying, success to general you.
Yeah.
Um, Success is really just not quitting because it's not about how many times you get knocked down, but it's about how many times you do get back up. And I know that sounds cliche and that sounds, like an athletic analogy, but I don't think it could be, it couldn't be better said because, rarely on the first iteration is someone successful. Rarely on the first time someone starts a business. It's the second, third, or fourth time. Or mention when you even talk about sports, it's like you think about baseball. We're both former baseball players. You know, Success is failing 70% of the time. And it's what can you do in those moments that create greatness? Um, and so for you in that, this is a long-winded question of like how do you feel like you positioned yourself well mentally to deal with the manure to
Yep.
get to where you are now?
So 1,000, and I'm so glad you asked that question because there will be failures, will be the manure, all that kind of stuff we talked about, but will it hold you back? And this, I have to give another story, but this reminds me of such a good story that I heard recently. And it's about this guy who went with his buddy. His buddy was a zookeeper, and he went to this spot where they house the elephants. And he went there and he was walking around with all the elephants, and the elephants weren't getting near him. And my buddy goes, "I don't get this. Why aren't the elephants are huge? They could come near me in 2 seconds." And the zookeeper said, "See that little piece of string? It's tied to their foot." He goes, "It's a piece of string tied to the foot. The elephant could bust right through that." And the zookeeper said, "Well, no. And the elephant is a tiny little baby, tiny baby. They put a string on his foot and tie him up with this piece of string. And as the elephant gets older, it doesn't know it can bust through that string. It's been holding him back since he was a baby." So I always say to people is you're going to fail, but is it going to hold you back? Success is not the failure. It's the ability to say, yes, I've learned from that and it's not going to hold me back. It's not the thing's going to be around my ankle all the time. I'm not only going to learn from it, but it's not even going to be part of it. I'm moving forward.
Yeah. So true. It's so true. And so it's so much easier said than done, right? It's one thing to say that looking at somebody else, but when it's your own situation, going through failure, I feel like it requires a community of people around you to be able to speak the truth into your life to help propel you beyond where you are. Because I don't think as humans, most of us are not strong enough to deal with significant failure upon failure alone.
None of us are, Grayson. None of us are. And that's the entire reason, one of the reasons we created this community here locally. But if you're listening in some other city or area, I would say be highly intentional to find your tribe, your 5 people, your group, that when you go through these things, they can fact check you. They can say, hey, this is limiting you. I can see this. You definitely need that wise counsel. Absolutely, Grayson. That's a great point.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So again, you work with business owners and business executives all of the time. To double click on this, conversation that we're just having, what are some of the pitfalls that you see business owners, even successful business owners, fall into on a regular basis that you might be able to shed a little bit of light on here for our listeners?
Yeah, the number one thing is they don't think big enough. They
Mm,
don't think big enough. And I will tell another story. I do tell stories, Grayson, but I'm going to tell this short story. And this was about a salesman back, gosh, this was in the 50s. This salesman took the bus to work every single day. So this will date a little bit. So the salesman would take it from the same bus stop every single day. Well, this particular day, he saw a little boy at the bus stop, and the boy was there, and he had a dog, totally disheveled dog, dirty, uncut, and and the little boy had a table in front of this dog and said, "Dog for sale, 25 cents." So the salesman goes, "Gosh, I'm going to go over to this little boy. I'll be late to work. I'm going to go to this little boy and teach him a little bit about sales." So he goes over to this little boy and he says, little boy, number one, your dog, cut its hair, shampoo, comb it. Nobody wants to buy a disheveled dog. Just kind of make it look presentable. And number two is nobody wants to buy a 25-cent dog. Think big. Think big. So the man goes, the little boy goes home. The next day, the salesman comes to that bus stop and he sees the little boy. And the little boy is there, table's there, dog was haircut, sharp, cut, looked great. Dog looked great. And there's a big sign that said, dog for sale, $10,000. So the salesman's like, oh boy, I'll be late to work a second day. Let me go talk to this little boy. So he goes, little boy, great job. Dog looks great. Cut the hair, shampoo, awesome. But young man, nobody's buying a dog for $10,000. Little boy said, sir, you told me to think big, and this is the biggest number I could think of, so I'm thinking big. The salesman thought, all right, I've done enough damage here. Good luck. So he leaves. The third day comes around. Salesman comes to the bus stop, and there's no dog, no little boy. Table's there, and there's a sign that says, dog for sale, $10,000. But across it says, sold in big red letters. The salesman goes, what in the, I'm going to be late the third day. So he goes around the neighborhood and finds the home where this little boy was. He talked to his mom, and finally the little boy came to the door. The salesman said, son, like you listened to everything I said, but you sold the dog for $10,000? The little boy said, yes, sir, I did. He goes, there's nobody buying a dog for $10,000. What happened? The little boy said, yes, sir. The little girl across the street had two $5,000 cats. So I love this story in the sense that most business owners aren't thinking big enough. That's a kind of a silly story to tell you, but it's the ability to think big pushes your mind, pushes you to where you could go. The limiting factors of, listen, this is how it's always been done, or this is the way it should be, or any of those kind of things. Those are barriers that are limiting you. Think big. It may not just be two $5,000 cats, but thinking big will catapult your career.
I love that. I just recently did an interview with a former coach of mine who happened to be in the real estate development space, and he's done some unbelievably impressive real estate development projects. And I was asking him a similar question, and he talked about, again, the concept of calculated risk, right? And obviously in real estate development, there's a lot of that. But without thinking big, without maybe taking a quote unquote risk, you're not able to potentially see the upside. But what you're also not able to do, it's an interesting phenomenon, I think, because there's also some freedom and some adventure that can exist in those moments that I think a lot of people try to protect themselves from because they're trying to guard against failure, loss, things like that. And it's just an interesting dynamic because I feel like the hardest part of doing that or starting something is the time beforehand. It's like I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking about it, I'm, thinking myself dizzy, and then you step out onto the ledge and there's actually a calmness and a freedom that exists once you get out there that you weren't necessarily anticipating.
Absolutely. I would push people to get out there. I'll tell you a true story. This is one of my favorite stories. And this is a true story about me. So this is, oh my gosh, this is probably 14 years ago, right about now. I was a terrible public speaker. And some people could argue I still am, but I was worse then, trust me. And I couldn't speak. I couldn't be in front of people. Just wasn't my jam. So I made a New Year's resolution. That's why I knew it was about this time that, listen, starting in the following year, I was going to learn how to speak. But I was like, gosh, how am I going to learn how to speak? So it's like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do some lunch and learns. I'm going to do lunch and learns about the economy or business development. I forget no, it's about business development. So it's like, okay, here's how I'm going to do the lunch and learn. I'm going to do it at the local chamber of commerce, but I'm not going to do it in the chamber of commerce of my city because I don't want to embarrass myself. I went to 3 towns over and joined the chamber of commerce 3 cities away because I don't want to embarrass myself with anybody I possibly could have known. Although nobody was going to the chamber of commerce, so I wouldn't have to worry. But anyway, it's 3 cities over, joined the chamber of commerce, do a lunch and learn in like mid-January. I probably had 14 people there. I think 12 of them were chamber of commerce people wanting a free lunch. I don't remember. Anyhow, long story short, found this guy. They got to get to know this guy. He was an architect. slash engineer in San Francisco. Anyhow, long story short is this client became my largest client to this day. But I asked Mike, like a year later into our engagement, I said, Mike, I know why I was at that chamber. Like, I know why I did it. Why did you go there? It was like 45-minute drive for you because I know you. Why did you go there, Mike? And he says, well, Jason, as you know, I'm an engineer and an architect. Like, I'm not really socially comfortable. I was like, I need to go to more lunches. But I didn't want to go to lunches in my hometown. So I decided to go 45 minutes out of town to kind of get acclimated. And this thing, it's a funny story that by getting out there provides such great results, but you got to make that first step.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. So as you think back to your journey, what's been the low point or the most difficult part of, your business trajectory to this point?
Miscommunications. Honestly, every problem I've ever had in business was around miscommunication. You'd think a guy like me who's great at communication, you still can have miscommunication. And this is for those of you in the crowd that are married, you'll understand the same thing. What is the greatest breakdown there? Sometimes miscommunication or unmet expectations, which are a result of miscommunication. I would say this, you know, be over communicative with your clients, be over communicative with your peers, be over communicative with folks. I said the biggest failures I've had or where I assumed something or didn't want to have that difficult conversation. Every single dark period I've had in career professionally, because I missed the communication somehow, not by any ulterior motive. I missed it. So I'd say to folks is be over communicative, even with bad news, lean into that. Every failure you'll have was because some sort of communication was lost.
Yeah, 100%. I love that. I love it. It is hard sometimes to lean in, but at the back end of that, you see so much fruit from doing so. So much fruit from doing so. One of the things as we start to wrap up here, one of the things that I believe in really has been true in my own story, and that we believe here on this podcast, and I don't even think we've talked about this before, is I believe that fear is the enemy. And for me, I think I think in life, there's two kinds of fear. I think there's the fear that can be positive to propel you to action and achievement. But the fear that I'm specifically talking about is the fear, the negative voice inside of you that really takes your eye off of the ball. And I think in my own life, as I look back on my story, there's several instances when I can think about that issue being really to my detriment. Um, so the question there is, what's a fear that again, you're successful, you seemingly have it all together, but what's a fear that you struggle with sometimes that, again, that might take your eye off the ball?
Yeah, no, and, and, and I appreciate it because we all have some level of fear and some level of we're not worthy, so to speak. You know, you got to find a place and you got to find a spot where you can kind of, I call it count your blessings. And I know it's a cliche, but like count your blessings. Like we live in a great area, you've got great clients, you've got these sort of things. So when you start talking about fear and those kind of different things, count your blessings, like really go through it and almost keep like even that's why I like almost like journaling or that kind of thing allows you to go back and say, man, we're doing this, kind of remembering that stuff. I think too many times we have a success and we moved on so quickly from it, we don't even go back to it to remind ourselves we had the success because we're so forward driven people. And that's not a bad thing. But if you're going to be forward driven on the successes, be forward driven on the failures. Too many times we move off our successes too quickly. We don't remember that we've got that ability and those wins.
Yeah. Well, I think to a fear for a lot of people that may or may not even articulate it this way, people that don't have, people that are just after success and there's not an attached purpose to success. I think a, I think a significant fear is that I achieve said success and then realize that it's not enough. And inevitably, I know that faith is important to both of us. We inevitably know that there is a deeper calling to our lives than just zeros on a balance sheet, than just relationships that we can make, all of those things. But I think a big fear that some people again feel is that, oh, I'm gonna grow, attain, 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 attain. And then I get to the place that has been the North Star for me for forever. And then realize, oh, that wasn't as fulfilling as I thought it was going to be. And I think that's something too that is important for all to hear is that if you're going after success, that's great. But success has to be correlated or connected to a deeper purpose in some way, shape, or form. Otherwise, it's just not going to be enough.
No, you're right, and there's a repercussion to every action we have. There's forgiveness, but there's always there's lasting repercussions. And I know it's not exactly what you, but I remember telling somebody who was dealing with like constantly trying to achieve something, constantly doing this, and they had somewhat of a temper with them, and when they did that kind of stuff, and I told them this story, and I said, "Listen, reminds me of the little boy um, that would always lose his temper, and his dad said, 'Hey, listen, here's a box of nails. Here's 30 nails.' He said, 'Every time you lose your temper, I want you to nail a hammer and nail into that fence post right there.' And so when he loses temper, he'd hammer a nail in. And then finally, the little boy's like, I don't want to hammer any more nails in. So he started to not lose his temper as much, not lose his temper. And he finally went to his dad and he said, 'Dad, I don't lose my temper anymore. And I hammered the nails in. I'm kind of, I'm good.' And his dad said, 'All right, for every day you don't lose your temper now, pull a nail out.' So after 30 days, he pulled all the nails out. He goes, 'Dad, I don't lose my temper. I pulled the nails out. What's left?' He brought his son over. He goes, 'Son, I forgive you for you lose your temper. And you know what? People will forgive you lose your temper. But look at that fence post.' And he saw 30 holes in the fence post. He goes, 'It still leaves a mark.' So I say, chasing something, doing these things. Listen, it's not bad, but just know whatever action you have will have a mark. And so whatever that is, know what that is, be comfortable with that. It's not saying to strive and do those kind of things, but anything that's inhibiting you or doing that, please know there's a mark to everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Jason, this has been awesome today. You've been, again, unbelievably intentional and insightful. We really appreciate, again, you hopping on with us. This is not, however, though, a financial podcast, but you know that I'm a financial guy. So I'd love to end our time together with a brief, kind of fun, lighthearted financial question. If you think back to your young formative years, do you remember the first thing that you saved for?
Well, I remember the first thing I did not save for. How about that? Is I
Great.
I got this is back in 19 in 89. So you'll have to Google what this is in 89. But in 1989, I was given by a grandmother $10,000. And I had $10,000. I didn't know what to do with it. It happened to be right across the street in my tiny little town was a Payne Weber shop. Payne Weber, we used to be an investment outfit. And I went into the guy
Yep.
at Payne Weber and I said, I have $10,000. And I was a kid. Oh, and he said 1989. And he said, "Hey, listen, why don't you look at a stock that'll be around for a minute?" And I go, "Which stock is that?" And he goes, "Mike, it's a company called Microsoft." He goes, "You should," and I thought about it and I go, "No, there's a car I want down the street." So I bought the car down the street and did buy Microsoft in 1989. So there you go. Listen to Grayson, don't listen to Jason. There you go.
Uh, let's not look at what Microsoft was then and is today.
Duly noted.
I love it. I love it. Well, Jason, thanks so much for coming on today. It's been a pleasure to hear a little bit more of your story and wisdom.
Thanks, Grayson. Have a great day. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.